It's July 17th and it's been way too long, so let's have another garden tour. Let's get into the garden and get started. Right over here, this is the only empty bed in the garden. I just pulled the last of the radishes that were growing there a couple of days ago. I have to check what the variety was, but I was very impressed. The reason I left them in so long is because they were supposed to be heat tolerant, meaning tolerant against heat, that they shouldn't go to flower and seed even though it got hot, and they did a great job. I still pulled edible radish even though we've had a lot of hot days, so I'm going to be growing that variety again. Next, we've got some tomatoes over here and basil. These are smaller than the tomatoes I have in the other part of the garden for two reasons. First of all, one reason is these are plants that are supposed to be smaller. The second reason is something's going on with the soil in this bed and I'm not sure what, so I want to get that tested before next season. For now, I keep giving them some liquid fish and seaweed fertilizer and hoping that they'll do a little better. There are some tomatoes growing. Over here are my shallots, which I'm about to pick. I actually came out here to the garden to pick the shallots, and then I realized it's time for a garden tour. Speaking of radishes going to flower and to seed, look, these beautiful radishes. These are the ones that I did not pick. I had some issues with a predator getting into my garden, which has been dealt with, but it ate my radishes down. And by the time they grew again, they started to go to flower, so I left them. They attract pollinators. They're beautiful, but this will be pulled, and the last of my peas that are dying over there also, because I'm going to be planting beets here shortly. Let's move to this side. Over here we've got cucumbers. Back up a bit for you. We got cucumbers growing over here and more cucumbers that were planted a little later growing over here. Multiple reasons why those cucumbers were planted later. First reason, I was having trouble with getting my cucumber seeds to germinate. The second reason is trying also an experiment. It wasn't supposed to be so many, it was supposed to be half and half, and trying to avoid some issues with insects that I was having with them in previous years by planting them later. We shall see, but we have some baby cucumbers already. Look at that, growing over here, so we'll have some, and we'll get the rest of the crop ready for making into pickles a little later. We've got two types of zucchini, some growing over here and then over here, a different variety. Moving on, we got my parsnips. They came up and they're growing slowly, but that's fine. They do better once it cools down. Over here we've got some winter squash. Do I remember what type of winter squash I planted here? Oh, there's a label. Hold on. Right there. It's a kabocha. So we've got kabocha on this side, kabocha on that side, and over here we've got my potatoes, carrots over here. Over here we've got the onions, and they are growing nicely and starting to bulb up. I put down, as you can see, some mulch to protect and keep the soil moist, and we got some nice onions growing over here, as you can see. Coming over here, these are the beds that used to have my garlic that I picked last week, and I planted almost immediately after harvesting the garlic some bush beans. Over here is two different varieties of bush beans and butternut squash over here. So winter squash, this will grow a little later, and we picked about the time of the last frost, or just last frost, first frost. So in the fall. And I have to pull out the extra plants. There should be one in each spot. More tomatoes over here. You can see these are growing more leaves, but I'm actually not sure if these are growing necessarily more tomatoes. That's it for July 17th. Again, as soon as I pull that out, I'm going to put beets in there. Once the shallots are out, I'm going to be putting carrots in there, and carrots where the radishes were. So there's some more planting to do for the second planting for a full crop for those things. And then it's a waiting game, waiting for the tomatoes to ripen and the cucumbers to grow bigger. Same with all the squashes and everything else that's going to be ready to pick in the fall, like the carrots and the potatoes.